So, 2010, I was beaten up by a group of my batchmates back in school, and I was also threatened that if I shared it with the authorities or my parents or my friends, that they would beat me up again. 2013, again back in school, I was in love with this girl for a few years now, and I was trying to pursue her, but I couldn't. And eventually, she changed her school. 2017 is when my career in the army ended because of a spine injury. And I spent the next 45 days in the military hospital fighting my will to end my life or to go ahead with my life. Now, when I look back at these events, you might wonder that there's no connection here. But for me, there was a common question that used to tie all these events together. Was I not man enough to stand up for myself? Was I not man enough to fight for my love? Was I not man enough to see things through? Was I not man enough? And it's not just a question that I've asked myself, it's a question that most of the literature, most of the movies, most of the novels, most of the role models that I've had in the past few decades that have asked me that question consciously or subconsciously. Am I man enough? 2017, when I became a civilian again and I had to redo my graduation, I came to Bangalore to redo my graduation, and I was diagnosed with depression and PTSD, a mental illness. All my life, I was told that men are the stronger ones, that men don't have issues, men figure their things out. So for a man to have a mental illness was, again, not man enough for me. And I used to resist that a lot. I resisted therapy, I resisted help, because for me, that was going against my whole concept of being man enough. Because for me, the way I was taught all my life, thanks to patriarchy, was that men figure out their things. And if I'm not able to figure out my things, I'm not a good man, I am not a good brother, I'm not a good partner, I'm not a good citizen. Eventually, I don't deserve love. And if I don't deserve love, even if somebody is trying to give me love, I will not take that. And I'll push people away, and that will isolate more. And so I sort of got into this whole cycle back in 2017. And this is where, thanks to the universe, the subject sociology entered my life. It was one of my majors. And the first thing that our professor told me that everything that you think and feel and perceive is not yours. It's of the society and it's of the people and the ideas around you. Of course, I disagreed because I was like, how does it make sense? Everything that I think is mine. Took me 3 years to accept sociology as a subject, to surrender myself to the reality of how it works. And we had beautiful papers on gender. We had beautiful papers on society, on patriarchy, on feminist literature, and so on. And soon I realized that I was such a high-performing, achieving man, but I was not a great man in terms of my emotional intelligence, in terms of my understanding of the society and myself and people around me. And there's a term that I have coined for myself. I was a PPS. It's called the patriarchal piece of shit. I realized I was that PPS for a very long time, but things needed to change, because the moment I had that awareness, I couldn't live with the fact that I had been ignorant all my life. So I tried figuring out what's the first step for me to unlearn and to get into this whole process of relearning and restructuring the way my mind works. This is where, luckily, I found poetry. Poetry became an emotional release also because I was going through a lot of other things there. And I started scribbling things. Eventually, in therapy, we started journaling things down. And it became an expression for me. And back in Bangalore, we have a beautiful circuit and a beautiful environment of open mics and poetry nights. So I started performing in open mics. I remember my first performance, I went there. I shared a piece about my story back in the army and how much it hurts me. And after the performance is done, I'm standing on the stage and crying. And then the audience is crying. And then I step outside the stage, and then I get a group hug. I go back home, and I feel good. So I thought, let me do it again. And I did it again, and again, and again. And after that, my branding in Bangalore Poetry Circle became that ex-Fauji guy that makes people cry. But every time I went home, I felt that there was a weight lifted off my shoulders. And so I kept doing for a very long time. This is when I got introduced to coaching, because I was undergoing therapy and then coaching, and then I realized that coaching makes so much sense, that self-helps make so much sense. And the moment I started expressing my pain and my vulnerability, a lot of people started reaching out to me. A lot of people started sharing their stories with me or tell me if they were going through something, but they connected with me and they're also willing to work on that. So this is the phase I got into coaching. This is the phase I started doing a lot of one-on-one sessions and workshops and keynotes and TEDx and so on. I was sharing my story. I was called a motivational speaker, but then I realized motivation is a scam. It doesn't work. And so then I started growing as a person, as a trainer, as a coach. And while that was going on, this one fine day I was observing something. Most of my one-on-one clients, most of my workshop attendees, most of my keynote attendees were women. And I would share my stories and I would feel good and I'll keep growing, but I checked the statistics throughout my social media. I had 90% women and 10% men while I was talking about being a man as to how I'm feeling. Where were all the men? And I couldn't figure it out. So I spent the next 3 years trying to figure out on ground, on social media, as to why are men not seeing my content? Why are men not engaging with me? And in my study, I found 3 pain points, 3 perspectives that I have. These are not universal truths, but 3 things that I figured out while I was doing my groundwork. First was the way we see victimhood. Now, men throughout history have been the more disposable ones, and the examples that a lot of scholars shared with me was back in the early days when people had to be sent to war, usually men were sent to war, partly because physically they were superior to fight, and partly because if some of the men didn't come back, and if the women were back home, they could still repopulate the kingdom. But when women went out, if the women started reducing, it started creating a threat to the whole kingdom. So by default, it was okay for some men to not come back home. And that's sort of promulgated down the generations wherein a lot of men's emotions, a lot of the pain that men go through is sort of taken as, oh, it's part of the thing, or it's supposed to be that way. So the way we define victimhood, which then translates to all the modalities and all the conversations and all the frameworks that are created around, is somewhere overlooking some of the pain points of men. That was the first point. Second was the way men are biologically tuned. So men are front to backward tuned. They're more into motor systems, and they're problem solvers. Women, on the other hand, their connection is from left to right. They're more in tune. They're more in tune with these emotions, and they feel things. And the tricky part about feelings is that you have to feel the feelings. You can't solve the feelings. And this is the pain point that a lot of men face, that you share something personal, you share something vulnerable with a man, and the first instinct they'll have is to, how do I solve this? Because if I don't know how to solve it, I don't know how to deal with the situation. But that goes in conflict with the whole point of expression. So that's the second pain point. And third, there's a scarcity of healthy male role models in our society. And when there's a scarcity of healthy male role models, and when there are such toxic people on the internet who go viral, who talk about, oh, you're a man, you shouldn't be talking about anything, leave away everything, you should be a stoic, you shouldn't feel anything, you should be happy, you should be sad, you should destroy everything. Now, while that's not a perfect narrative to be in, it's still a credible narrative for a 15-year-old young boy who's insecure about his body, his life, his partner, every single thing, and he doesn't know if I'm going to survive in this cruel world or not. And if somebody shows a model that, hey, if you do this, you're going to become a man, it's still something that's believable for them, doesn't matter how flawed it is. And that's the danger of not having healthy male role models. So I had this awareness, okay, cool, these are 3 major pain points that's happening. Now, while it explained why men behave the way they do, it doesn't excuse it, right? So what was it that was stopping men from then changing themselves or evolving into a better species? And I realized that whatever I'm doing, I'm asking men to do something, but I'm also asking them in a way that they're not getting it. So I decided to do this social experiment. Gratitude to this guy called Justin Baldoni. He did a TED Talk on Man Enough, and he shared a social experiment. And this whole experiment I did was inspired by him. What I started doing on my social media, I would put the same topic, the same content, but I would change the language and the modality. And in my reels, in my videos, in my posts, I started incorporating the reframed version of the 3 pain points we had. So I'll keep iterating that, hey, you matter, you and your emotion are not disposable. Whatever you think or feel does matter, I'm going to take it into account. Second, I love you regardless of whether you bring a solution or a perspective on the table. I love you regardless of whatever you bring on the table. Even if you're not able to provide, I still love you because you deserve that. And the third was, hey, I'm not perfect, nor will I ever be, but there are a few things in my life that I have done that have given me certain tangible results, and then I'll show them the results. And if I feel if I share it with you, and if you're open to it, it might just benefit you. Are you open to that? And then a lot of men started responding to it. And so suddenly, my clientele and the whole demography started changing. I had more men writing to me via emails, via DMs, or Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and people would start sharing their things with me. And I realized that the pain point was still the same, but the way men were responding to content was very different. And this is where, after doing it for 2-3 years, I started observing the shift in the metrics on my social media. And as of now, it's 55 to 45, wherein now it's 55 men and 45 women. And this number keeps being around 50-50 over the past 2 years. And I wondered, and it was a breakthrough moment for me, because I realized that it's not that men do not face problems. It's just that A, they don't know how to communicate. B, there's no safe space. And third, most of the conversations on modalities that are built around us are mostly not very inclusive of men. And so I've been doing this for a while now. It's been a few years, and I've been getting feedback, and every time I get a feedback, I pump it back on my social media, and then the numbers start showing it. And then I realize that it's very important that all the genders coming together give a space for men to talk about their emotions, and to give them a very healthy definition of masculinity. The definition of masculinity needs to be redefined. And if I have to draw a parallel, I call it the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. The thesis was, historically, men are stoic and they don't feel things, and they can just shove everything under the carpet, and they can just be whoever they want. That doesn't matter. Their job is to provide and take care, and that's it. The antithesis is that, hey man, you can keep crying. It's okay to be weak. You don't have to do it. And you don't have to take responsibility and all that. It's okay and all of that. But that also doesn't sit well with men. When we come to the synthesis, wherein the job is, a healthy masculine looks like, I should be able to provide, this is what I want, but I should also be able to sit down and talk about how vulnerable I'm feeling with my loved ones, and we come to the center. True masculine is knowing that I can right now lean on my buddies or share something with my partner, but at the same time wipe my tears off and go to war. Men respond to that language better. So it's very important that while we're dealing with all the genders, we give an inclusive space to all the genders coming together. It's like a yin and yang. We have to, as genders, we have to complement each other. Not just ask people that, hey, you know what, you can come and talk to me, but also take initiatives. Also respect if somebody's being on their own journey and trying to figure them out. Give feedback if it's needed, but also give them a space of understanding. And if we do that, if we make sure that the yin and yang are being complemented well, that is how we create a very emotionally regulated society, emotionally intelligent society, wherein every gender collaborates instead of going conflict with each other. So I would like to end the talk by just urging all of you that if you have any men in your life who is important to you, ask them, hey, how are you doing? Probably the first time they'll respond by saying, I'm fine, it's okay. Ask them again. They'll probably get annoyed. Third time, ask them again and tell them, I'm going to be here whenever you want to me. Most of the times, men will start opening up. And when they open up, do not tell them how they should feel about it. Just tell them, hey, whatever you're feeling, doesn't matter I agree with it or not, I want to understand. Would you help me understand? Let's go for a walk. And you'll see 90% of the men start responding to it. So it's an urge to all of you. It's an urge to make sure that we redefine masculinity and we redefine how men's mental health is looked at. Thank you so much. It's been an honor serving you. Thank you.